Hello, friends. Welcome to Storycraft. On this channel, you will enjoy world-top stories. Let's view the video. Anglo-Saxon Huscarls, the secret elite force that died with a kingdom, forged in loyalty. The rise of the Anglo-Saxon Huscarls in the shadowed halls of English kings. A brotherhood of warriors was born, not by blood, but by unshakable oath. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were Huscarls, an elite force bound not just by duty, but by honor. Their story begins in the 11th century, during the rule of King Knut the Great, a Danish conqueror who ruled over England, Denmark, and Norway. Knut knew that a kingdom held by the sword must be defended by the sword. So he created a new class of warriors, drawn from the toughest Norse mercenaries and the bravest Anglo-Saxon soldiers. He gave them something more than just gold or land. He gave them purpose. The word Huscarl comes from Old Norse, Huscarl, meaning houseman. But make no mistake, these were not mere house servants. They were the king's personal bodyguards, his shield bearers, his last line of defense. They swore an oath to stand by him, even if the world fell apart. And they were paid handsomely for it. Not only with silver and estates, but with unmatched prestige. A Huscarl wasn't just respected. He was feared. He carried a two-handed Danish axe, sharp enough to cleave a man, and his shield, in two. His armor gleamed with chainmail and iron, often better than that of lesser nobles. He didn't bow to power. He was power. As England's political landscape shifted, Huscarls became more than bodyguards. They were enforcers of royal justice, commanders on the battlefield, and elite warriors who could turn the tide of war with a single charge. Whether in the halls of Westminster or the icy, blood-soaked fields of the north, their presence was unmistakable. The sight of their towering frames and flashing axes struck both awe and terror into the hearts of men. But loyalty came at a cost. To be a Huscarl meant to live under a sacred bond. To break oath was to lose not only your honor, but your place in the world. Many Huscarls trained from boyhood, learning to fight not for glory, but for their king's life, for their comrades' lives. They were bound tighter than blood, and, as the tides of fate surged toward 1066, the Huscarls stood ready to fight, ready to die. Little did they know, they would soon face a storm that even their steel could not withstand. Steel and oath. Inside the life of a Huscarl warrior, before the clash of swords and the thunder of hooves, there was discipline, routine, relentless training. A Huscarl's life wasn't built on battle. It was built on preparation. Each morning began before the sun rose. Huscarls trained in formations, practicing shield walls until they could stand like iron walls of flesh and steel. They trained with axes, swords, and spears, but the axe was their signature. Long-handled, double-edged, capable of cleaving helmets with one brutal swing. It wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of their will. But Huscarls weren't just brutes. They were thinkers, strategists, trusted advisors. The king would often rely on them not just in battle, but in matters of diplomacy and governance. To be a Huscarl meant mastering both the blade and the mind. Their diet was rich compared to the common man. Meat, bread, ale, and fruits. They needed fuel for the demanding life they lived. Their bodies were hardened, not just through combat, but by living outdoors, patrolling for bandits, and escorting nobles across dangerous roads. Armor was sacred. Chainmail hauberks, conical helmets with nasal guards, kite-shaped shields, all of it meticulously cared for. They didn't just wear armor. They respected it. It was both protection and symbol, but their most important armor, their oath. This oath wasn't spoken lightly. Once sworn, it was for life. The king's enemies were their enemies, his fate, their fate. They were expected to die before allowing harm to come to him, and many did. Inside the royal court, Huscarls were symbols of strength. They stood behind the throne, silent but terrifying. One glare from a Huscarl could silence an entire hall, and on the battlefield, they were often the first to charge, and the last to retreat. Brotherhood defined them. If a Huscarl fell, his comrades would avenge him without question. They fought back to back, shields locked, hearts united. They shared food, fire, and fury. They celebrated together and mourned together. Still, the life of a Huscarl was lonely. They were above the common soldier, yet always below the nobility, forever caught in between, revered, yet feared. Admired, yet set apart, and always, they knew one truth. The day would come when they'd be called to lay down their lives, not for fame, not for riches, but for the man they called king. As 1066 loomed, many Huscarls sensed it, a final reckoning. A battle not just for a crown, but for everything they had sworn to protect. And when that day arrived, they would stand, steel in hand, oath in heart, ready to write their final chapter in blood. Guardians of the crown, serving kings and shaping battles. The Huscarls were more than warriors. They were the living shields of the English monarchy. Wherever the crown travelled, they followed. From the echoing halls of Winchester to the icy cliffs of Northumbria, Huscarls were always near the king, silent and alert. Their presence wasn't merely symbolic. In a time when betrayal brewed behind closed doors and assassins hid among courtiers, Huscarls stood as an unbreakable wall of protection. No one got near the king without passing their watchful eyes. They were trained to detect danger in a whisper, in a glance, in a shadow. On the battlefield, they didn't just protect the king, they commanded fear. Their tactics were legendary. At the center of every Anglo-Saxon army stood the shield wall, and at the heart of the shield wall stood the Huscarls. Shoulder to shoulder, axe to axe, they formed a brutal, immovable force. When enemies struck, they didn't break. They responded with precision and rage, but their duties stretched beyond blood and battle. In court, they acted as royal marshals, upholding justice. In times of peace, they escorted nobles, carried royal messages, and patrolled borders. A Huscarl's loyalty didn't flicker with war, it blazed through peace as well. Every Huscarl was hand-picked, not by family name, but by proven valor. They were often raised from the common ranks, men who had shown unmatched bravery, discipline, and skill. In a world ruled by birthright, the Huscarls were a rare symbol of earned honor. They became living legends. Children told tales of their deeds. Bards sang of their courage in mead halls. Even rival kings respected them. But it was not only the axe or armor that made a Huscarl, it was belief. A belief that kings were not just rulers, but divine symbols. To protect the king was to protect England's very soul. And as the distant drums of invasion thundered across the sea, the Huscarls stood ready. Not for glory, not for conquest, but to protect the legacy they had sworn to uphold, even if it meant facing the storm alone. 1066, the last stand, Huscarls at the Battle of Hastings, October 14th, 1066, a date carved into the heart of English history. The sky was grey over Senlac Hill, and with it came a storm that would change the fate of a kingdom forever. At the top of the hill stood King Harold Godwinson, surrounded by his loyal Huscarls. They had already marched 250 miles from the north, where they had just defeated a Viking invasion at Stamford Bridge. Exhausted, bloodied, but unbroken, they now faced a new enemy, William of Normandy. The Normans came with cavalry, archers, and iron discipline. But the Huscarls, they had the axe, they had the wall, they had something no Norman could buy, unyielding loyalty. The battle began with a thunderous charge, Norman cavalry racing uphill. But the Huscarls did not move. Their shield wall held, crushing horses and men alike. Time and again, the Normans attacked. Time and again, they were thrown back. But William adapted. He used feigned retreats, tricking the English into breaking formation. The shield wall wavered. Chaos crept in. Still, the Huscarls stood firm. When arrows blackened the sky, they locked shields tighter. When knights charged, they answered with swinging axes. Their presence was a fortress of will, every fallen Huscarl replaced by another, teeth clenched, hands bloodied, hearts burning. But as the day dragged on, exhaustion took its toll. Then came the fatal moment. An arrow, fired blindly into the sky, found its mark. King Harold fell, struck in the eye. The heart of the army died in an instant. The Huscarls did not run. They circled his body, forming one last wall. Even surrounded, even outnumbered, they fought to the end. Axe met sword, shield met spear. They didn't surrender. They didn't beg. They died as they lived, unbroken, and with their fall, so too, fell the kingdom they had sworn to defend. Fallen with the throne, the legacy that died with Harold after Hastings, silence followed. The once mighty Huscarls were no more. The Norman conquerors dismantled the old order. New laws, new lords, new ways. The axe gave way to the lance. The shield wall gave way to cavalry charges. The oath of loyalty was replaced by feudal chains. The names of the Huscarls faded from records. Their graves were unmarked. Their brotherhood dissolved. They died with their king, and with them, a way of life vanished. But legends don't die. Whispered songs and ancient chronicles, their story endures. Of warriors who chose duty over life. Of men who stood, even when the world collapsed around them. They were the last guardians of Anglo-Saxon England. They were the Huscarls, and they never broke. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel Storycraft for more interesting videos.